Hello and welcome back inside the Parc Fermé for podcast number 842. This is Todd.
No, Todd, not now!
AKA Negative Camber. I know what you're thinking. It's not a race weekend. We're not reviewing a race. But I got to be honest with you, I'm super excited anyway. Why? Because we're going to talk about Formula One news first, and then we're going to talk about Le Mans. Which means, of course, I had to bring in the expert and to cover all that. You know what that means.
Wrecked from out of the wasteland. He's bad, he's beautiful, he's crazy. It's...
Hello, everybody. This is Paul Charsley, the International.
Paul, how you doing?
I'm doing good.
Good.
Energy, man. Energy.
Energy. I know.
Yes.
You just flew back from your second favorite racetrack in America, Watkins Glen.
Yes, indeed. Yes, we just finished up the 6 hour from Watkins Glen. Not as successful, unfortunately, as our last visit there.
Yeah.
But,
Darn that IMSA.
Damn those tire pressure rules.
They're a booger. So,
they were
Paul,
a booger.
I wanted to speak. So, Grace is not, just bowing out delightfully. She's actually on assignment. I think she is going to the super secret underground bunker that the government has somewhere, and
in Salt Lake City? Where is that?
Yeah, I don't know. Somewhere out there. Who knows what
she's
what
eating
Grace
different
is.
colored foods, I saw.
It's all yellow, wasn't it?
Yeah, something. There was a green thing in there today.
There was a green thing. It's funny when Grace goes on a business trip or otherwise, she's a foodie, so she posts all these pictures of her food, and all of her food is yellow. Yeah, it's kind of funny.
She doesn't describe the food other than the color.
Just the color, It doesn't even
How does
say
it
if it's
taste,
good
Grace?
or bad.
Yeah,
doesn't say.
she does.
Doesn't matter. It's just all yellow. So
work good in Germany.
Exactly. So I thought it would be good opportunity to do what I'd been threatening to do, which is do sort of a review with you, since you are the sporting manager of the Heart of Racing Aston Martin team number 23 and number 27 in GT Pro, GT, and IMSA, but you also happen to just have raced at Le Mans for the team's first time at Le Mans, and I thought this would be, what better insight than, I don't know, maybe if I got the captain or somebody on here to talk about his
he knows a
outing.
couple of two things.
He knows a thing or two, but what better way to find out what it's really like to go to Le Mans as a GT team in a 60 some odd car field, right?
Yep,
and
67, I think.
Yeah.
If you count the NASCAR.
Yeah, right.
I didn't really count it. But...
Yeah, it didn't count that either. Yeah. So, and bless their hearts. Here's the one thing. All the NASCAR guys are posting videos of the NASCAR passing like a Ferrari and all that stuff. And I wasn't saying anything. I'm really happy. They're excited about it, right? Because I thought, to get a lot of NASCAR people watching Le Mans, that's great. It's great for the sport, and they were having a lot of fun with it. They didn't post a lot of pictures of the LMP1 or the hypercars blowing the doors off the NASCAR, but that's the Ferrari, hypercars
expected,
going. They were showing a GT car, of course. Yeah, but anyway, fair enough. So before we jump into Le Mans, though, so for all of you Formula One fans listening, we are going to talk about Formula One. A couple news stories I thought were worth talking about. For the first portion of this podcast, we'll talk about Formula One news, and then after that, we'll jump into Le Mans. And if you absolutely hate Le Mans, then you may want to just stop listening at that point. But I am going to talk about Le Mans because I don't have too many friends, Paul, that are a sporting manager of a team that raced at Le Mans. I'm going to take advantage of it.
Too many. Yeah.
I'm going to exploit my friendship with Paul Charsley if it's the last thing I do.
Hey, Formula One, every driver, part of the Triple Crown is Le Mans, right?
Yeah, it is.
Formula One World Championship, Le Mans, and Monaco, I believe.
That
Indy
pesky
500.
Spaniards won Le Mans, Fernando Alonso. So it's a big deal.
Yeah, a lot of Formula One drivers would love to race there and have raced there when they've had the opportunity, either in between contracts or at the end of their career, or sometimes beforehand. But
right. So let's talk about some Formula One real quick. So the big news that I've seen, all the headlines, super excited that Ryan Reynolds is now a team owner in Formula One. This was big news from Autosport. I'm just going to read it from that fine publication, Autosport. This is what that article said. On Monday, Alpine's parent group, Renault, announced it has sold the shares equaling 24% of the team, they valued the team at $900 million. That's with an M, million, to an investment group including Otro Capital, Redbird Capital Partners, and Maximum Effort Investments. U.S. investment firm Redbird's portfolio includes the third largest stake in Fenway Sports Group, a group which owns the Major League Baseball team Boston Red Sox, and Premier League club, you may be familiar with them, Liverpool.
Heard of them?
Yeah, heard of them. It also holds a stake in football clubs AC Milan and Toulouse.
Okay.
How about that? Now,
that's quite large.
It is quite large. And to continue, Maximum Effort Investments is led by actors Ryan Reynolds and Rob, how do you pronounce that?
McElhaney?
McElhaney? I should know. I'm Scottish. I've got an MC name. I should just by nature be able to pronounce that.
I think it's McElhaney.
Yeah, it's McElhaney, who also own Wrexham, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that was a big moment for them
this
year.
Yeah.
With fellow actor Michael B. Jordan joining as a co-investor.
Right.
Otro Capital's co-founder Alec Shiner will join the Instant Squad's board of directors. So big,
very exciting.
All very exciting. Who can't get excited about Ryan Reynolds coming into Formula One as a team owner? As you pointed out on your post, I'm afraid this may not turn out the Cinderella story that you had at Wrexham.
That's right. The Wrexham show was great. I really enjoyed that. I really did. And, it was a good story, good storyline. Just shows you the power of popularity, that they infused cash, but then they use their popularity basically to probably make a pretty tidy profit by this point, I think, on the whole Wrexham shenanigans. I just don't think maybe that if you want to be an investor in Formula One, I think, fine. I'm not sure what you get out of it in the end. I'm not sure if this is an investment where they're saying, someone's laying out, oh yeah, and in 5 years' time you'll have this kind of recouping of your investment. But it's just Renault or Alpine, whatever, would not be the team I would choose to put my cash into.
Yeah,
honestly, I mean they've always had a tumultuous relationship with everything, and I think throwing your money at that team is probably not your best investment strategy.
Well, it's interesting, Paul. You and I. This is why we're buddies. On the surface, you'd think this might be good and more American investment F1, and hey, that's great, and it includes a Hollywood star like Ryan Reynolds. But to me, this seems that Renault is seeking serious cash infusion at best, and that's interesting in and of itself. Or they're moving towards an exit strategy, and given their CEO's recent screed and criticism about the performance of the team, right? So, to me, I didn't read this. I saw the headlines in the social media, and everybody's super excited about Ryan Reynolds getting in, and I'm sitting over here and gnashing teeth and wringing hands because I see this as a Renault exit strategy to get out of this team. And that concerns me more than me being happy Ryan Reynolds is in Formula One. I had nothing against Ryan. I don't know him. I'm sure he's a delightful guy, but I'm just a little worried about that. It's sad because something isn't right over there, Paul. And you and I have said this now for 3-4 years. With all of Renault's backing for the last several years, this should have come on song back in 2022 at least with the regulation changes. But ultimately, I say they should have capitalized during the Ricardo years as a team, and they should have been on that. Now, I know they were locked into regulations, and sometimes it's kind of hard to innovate when everything is locked down under regulations, and that meant that 2022 was a big regulation change and should have seen Renault really exceed and they haven't. They should be, as a manufacturer works team, should be fighting at the sharp end of the grid, and they're
Yeah.
not. And so that's how I read this. I think it's Renault backing out.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, they definitely they always keep reissuing a timeline for their success, which is
Yeah.
always in the future. Unfortunately,
Yeah. Right.
it's not next
Right.
week. It's in a plan for success. And
Right.
maybe you're right. Maybe, you know, who invests into a factory team?
Yeah. Right.
That just doesn't
It
usually
doesn't
happen.
happen.
The
Right.
factories like control, and they
Right.
definitely, not selling pieces of their own manufacturing facilities and everything. So yeah, I could say that could be certainly an inkling to the if they start selling pieces and parts, it makes it a lot easier to exit at the end when you're not trying to sell 100% of a team, right? Um,
Well, it could be similar to Mercedes, Paul, where you had
mm,
Toto Wolff as a third owner, you've got Mercedes as a third owner, and then you have
right,
Ineos as a third
right,
owner, right?
right.
Renault very well could be saying, let's soften the blow a little bit, and we're fine with owning a third eventually. I don't know.
Yeah, yep, could be just a restructuring of how they do it. But then, as I said, I just try to figure out how you would get return on investment. I thinking out loud, if I was going to invest my 22.5 million or whatever it was, how much was it, the
I
investment?
don't know what the total investment was.
Yeah. Oh,
24%.
24%. So we don't actually know what the actual financial, got to be more than that, obviously. It's got to be a pretty weighty sum. But, I'd look at Williams. I know Doralton Capital are in there already. Um, Haas, maybe not so much. I'm just not sure what other teams. I think Toro Rosso would be, I mean, AlphaTauri would be a decent idea. But Alpine is just, I don't know, historically and now it just seems to be a bit of a mess. And why would you
Hmm.
want to throw your money at something? And it could be as easy as, you know, Formula One hype is as it is.
Yeah.
Everyone, wants to be involved, but they don't necessarily understand everything that's going on behind the scenes and the history of different teams and how they work and what success actually is. They may know just what Renault did 3 years ago. They're
Right.
looking at it with a new pair of eyes, perhaps. Um, but I don't think you can discount what's happened in the past that tends to rear its ugly head continually, I believe.
Yeah. I wonder if Ryan called Gene and got Gene's impression on his ownership in Formula One.
Sometimes these just because, yeah, it's weird. I've seen some things before where there's someone jumps in there because of hype, but they really don't do due diligence at all.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
Just
what
because
I
you've
was a
got the
little worried
money,
about.
and it's like so. I said, yeah, Ryan Reynolds certainly seems to be a good guy, and I love the Wrexham show, and I'm not like, oh, what are you doing in Formula One kind of thing when I made
Right.
my statement. I'm not sure. It was like, I don't think this team is a team. Not that you shouldn't be welcomed into Formula One, but this team
Right.
is probably the least likely team I would ever invest money into.
Yeah. 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 If they valued it at 900 million, he spent some coin.
Hmm.
Let's talk about. I thought this is interesting. Now you've got to take this a little grain of salt, folks. This came from some British newspaper headlines that I read. That
Oh,
you
they're
know,
usually 100% factual.
I'm just saying, my friend Paul and my other British friends might say that the source is a bit dodgy, as they might say. But I did read these headlines, and I went and
Okay.
read that it's talking about Lewis Hamilton's contract. So you
Mm,
remember about a week or so ago, Lewis had put a contract concept in front of Mercedes. They're negotiating with Toto this contract.
hmm.
Now, at the time, that was rumored to be a very weighty contract, a very
Yeah.
long contract that included not only driving for the foreseeable 1 or 2 years, but also a long-term role with Mercedes and the team. So it's interesting because his contract ends at the end of this season, and he put this contract forward to Mercedes to extend his stay. But according to some of the papers in the UK, Mercedes and Lewis are a long way apart on this
Hmm.
deal. Apparently, Lewis, who currently makes 27.5 million pounds per year with a $15 million bonus for winning the title, now wants that bonus to be paid in full along with the salary, because it's really up to Mercedes to make a title winning car, and that's not on his shoulders, which I understand his point. I don't know that Merck would see it that way, but I get the point. It also seems that, and I think if you go back far enough on our website, you'll find that over the last 3-4 years, I've written about this concept, because this isn't the first time it came up.
I was going to say, this sounds like we've been here before, right?
We have been here before. When he was talking about his last contract he signed, he was talking about really wanting this long-term ambassador for Mercedes kind of role, right? That didn't happen back then, which I thought was interesting. And if it was going to happen, and if there was ever a time to sort of position that where it may have had some legs to it, it would have been on his previous contract negotiation, I think, more so than now, but maybe not. I don't know. What he wants is a 10-year brand ambassador role worth $20 million pounds per year. Merck, it is said that they offered a 1-year deal with an option for a second. And if that's true, they are miles apart on this deal, right?
Yes, yes.
If Merck only offered a 1-year deal, it suggests that Lewis could be looking at the end of the road, or he'll have to realign what he thinks he's now worth in F1. Lewis left the value add, to me, too late. I think that should have been done a couple of years ago. But he wanted a sweet deal of being paid as a brand ambassador to fly around, go to the events and parties and stuff that he does, post on Instagram and, about his lifestyle and all that, and promote the brand. And when he was winning everything for 8 years, that may have looked more attractive than it does now, right? As I argued in the piece that I posted on our website, Merck is only a third owner of this team. So Ineos is the other third, and then Total Wolff is the final third. The other two owners may not find the $200 million price tag for his social media platform that attractive. That's a lot of money. Now, you could argue that he has 33 million followers on Instagram. And let's face it, Instagram is his biggest platform. He's got a Twitter account, but those are the same people that follow him across all of it. So if you take Instagram, that's 33 million. Some simple math would tell you that the team would be paying $6 million per follower. And in marketing terms, that's not really realistic. Traditionally,
Is that how that works out?
Well, I think so, isn't it? Is that how that math works out? Correct me if I have my math wrong.
I don't think so.
No?
It would be 6 million times 33 million per follower?
No, maybe it's, what is it, 600K? What am I off here?
I think it's 6 grand.
This is the dodgy calculator I'm trying to do it on. So
Because you're trying to use solar.
It is.
I think you're a little way off.
Little solar
on
thing.
the math. Either way.
Well, wait a minute. We can get to this.
Okay.
6
This is
million
exciting.
times 33 equals 1 point.
I'm sure we should be doing this on the fly.
We should do it on the fly. Let's. No,
Well,
damn it, I'm gonna get it right. Okay, so suffice it to say,
it's 20 million divided 33 million. But anyway,
exactly.
Either way, it's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money. Let's just pretend it's like $200 billion per follower.
Let's just do that, because it's probably a better idea than trying to find the actual number.
So whether it's, a couple 100,000 a follower or, 60,000, whatever it might be per follower, when you start to add that up, I'll have to go back and do the math. But traditionally, my point in this is that math corrected, traditionally you would look at $100 per 10,000 followers. So that would be closer to 300K, and you'd have to adjust per post, right? So a lot of times I went and did a little research, and I was looking for like mega influencers, right, with like millions of followers.
Like Ryan Reynolds.
Ryan Reynolds, right? And some of them make, a lot of money per post on that sort of thing. But even so, you'd have to in order to get back up to to the 200 million they're investing over 10 years, when
Hmm.
you start to divide that out and the number of posts per day, per month, per year, divided by the cost per year, you have 20 million per year, then you have to do the whole math and you figure out how much they're paying per follower to see whatever Lewis
Yeah.
might say,
Yeah. I'm not
right?
sure Toto really cares that he's promoting Mercedes anyway.
I don't,
But what,
yeah, I don't
and
know
you
that he
got to,
would.
yeah, you got to figure out what is the value of an ex-athlete,
Right,
in the long term. Like 20
right.
years, Jackie Stewart's made that work for him, but I don't think he's making millions of dollars being Jackie Stewart, former world champion from the 70s. They have a
Well,
value, but as soon as they stop competing,
yeah,
there's a little, hangover of their stuff. But I think generally people move on to the next person who's achieving amazing success in their loved sport, right?
yeah,
So it could be
yeah,
George that takes the spot of Hamilton, Orlando, whatever.
right,
But
right.
I just think there's a certain longevity to it, but the numbers that you're spouting out don't make any sense to anyone, giving anyone that kind of money for that length of time, no
Yeah,
matter
if it,
what their impact. I just think it'll lessen quite a lot. Lewis will always be have a very high regard in motorsports, but I just don't think he'll have that impact.
yeah, I don't know that he would either unless he's still involved in Formula One, even though he's not driving. If he was involved working for the team, or I don't know. I'm
Yeah,
with you. $20 million a year for 10 years, $200 million. So the reality of it is, how much is that having his platform of 33 million people? That's a lot of
yeah,
people, but keep in mind that Formula One reaches billions of people a year, right?
hmm,
So I kind of feel like it's an important platform. You could leverage a lot about what he's doing in the sport, outside of the sport, the changes. But there again, to your point, he'd have to be in Formula One, either participating as a driver or team boss or,
yeah,
or some role, to make
yeah,
that valid, I think.
yeah,
On
yeah,
a purely
absolutely.
business decision,
Hmm.
I've said in the past I wouldn't resign him, but that's easy for me to say because I don't have the emotional attachment
Yeah,
that Mercedes and Toto have. Having won 7 titles, or
yeah.
I
It's
get
it's
it,
difficult.
but
It's difficult how you part ways with someone you've achieved such great success with.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
How do
yeah,
you do it and merge into a non-competitive lifestyle, or he still wants to drive, and then all of a sudden he's going to switch to another team, or they're going to have you know a
right,
divorce at the end of
right,
something that was truly astounding, which
yeah.
would be a genuine shame, I think.
Yeah,
um
the only thing I have to base this on, and it was not when F1 is as popular as it is now with social media, etc., is you look at a 7-time champion like Schumacher. Now
hmm,
that departure at Ferrari is pretty tough, right? This is a
right,
guy who systematically rewrote every record there was practically in Formula One at the time,
yep,
right? And so he walks away from Ferrari, and this combination, you couldn't have gotten bigger in F1 at the time than Schumacher Ferrari. And then he
yeah,
walked away. There was no 10-year ambassadorship for him. You could argue maybe he didn't want it. That's possible. He came back in Mercedes. It was a different
hmm,
deal when he came back. The pomp and circumstance wasn't quite there when he came back. And
no,
you look at Mika, he's made a good living post winning 2 titles. But Schumacher won 7 titles. I don't know. I think you could look, maybe they'll meet somewhere in the middle. Because you could argue very strongly, I might add, that Lewis is a very important part of the Mercedes team's history and F1 in general, and
yeah,
his footprint on the sport. But maybe they find some happy medium, but I don't think it's 20 million a year.
right. I mean, there's a lot of value in continuing the relationship and him being an ambassador,
Mm,
absolutely, for
hmm.
Mercedes the brand, not
Yeah,
for Mercedes the team, though.
yeah. I
There's
think
not
it's
a
more.
lot that
Yeah,
Enos and Toto
Toto.
will actually gain from that. But
Yeah,
being a brand ambassador for Mercedes, sure, just let him roll out and he can do
yeah,
his little thing and throw him a few mil a year. But
yeah,
yeah, that just seems like a big, and that's the way you should go out. But you don't want them to, butt heads and then sever a relationship like that. So
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's a,
let's hope they can figure it out.
yeah.
Um,
Hopefully they will. He's got a lot of fans, and a lot of people would love
yeah,
him seeing, win another title, et cetera, et
yeah.
cetera. So,
But then they've still got to manage Lewis in a
yeah,
way,
yeah,
you know,
yeah,
because
yeah.
Lewis is a single-minded person,
Yep,
and obviously his flamboyant clothing and
yep,
his approach to life and everything like that. If you're still under a payment scheme from manufacturer, you still have
yeah,
to hold yourself to a certain level. I'm not saying he does anything bad. I'm just saying you're still a representative. You can't get away from that and just go do whatever you want to do.
yeah. It's
So
true. That's true.
yeah,
You got to be careful those long term deals. If he's not driving or working in Formula One, he's just a brand ambassador.
yeah,
He hobnobs with a heck of a lot of people, and
yeah,
sometimes you can get into situations.
hmm
That could have a negative impact. And so for 10 years, he would really still be contractually under sort of a no disrepute type of contract that would
right.
gauge how he lives and what he
Yeah, does
does.
he want to do that? You know,
Does
he
he want
wanted
to
to do
do that?
music. Can he release a
Right.
song with swear words in it? Can he
Right.
get,
Right.
you know, do
Right.
whatever?
Right.
I felt like Lewis really wanted to just once he left Formula One, he was going to go do all the other things he wasn't
Right.
legally allowed to do. But
Right.
I'm not sure being under a Mercedes contract would allow him to do that.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. And now I kind of feel like by suggesting or putting this contract in front of the team, kind of feel like maybe he's come full circle on that and kind of figured out his cash cow here.
Yeah.
Having that 20 million large a year just to do whatever you want, it's a pretty sweet deal. So,
Yeah.
so anyway, yeah, we'll see. Hopefully they'll come to some agreement. But on paper, if it was me and I was told I wouldn't resign him, period. But that's just
hmm
me. I would move on. I got George. I could get Mick in that other seat. I could try to lure Lando, Leclerc. There's a lot of options you've got out there. And
Right.
as much as it pains me, I mean, the guy here behind me is Schumacher
hmm
in a 2004 car. But I was a Schumacher fan, and as much as it pains, it ends. It
hmm
ends, and it's time to move to the new crop of drivers, and I
The new
feel like
thing.
that's
Yeah.
where we are.
Yeah.
All right. So those are the two F1 stories I wanted to talk about, but now the
Yep.
important part,
Ooh.
Paul. The really important part.
Get to the show!
This is the
It is
show.
the show.
It is this week anyway.
All right. So for all you Formula One diehards that listen to the podcast for Formula One and don't want to hear about Paul's adventure at Le Mans, this is the chance for you to bail out.
We'll wait.
We're changing.
We'll wait.
All right, we'll wait. Ready? Go.
Okay.
All right, Paul. Let's talk about Le Mans. All right. It always rains at Le Mans.
Yes, it did.
Yeah. So, all right.
Sure it
So
did. Okay, grill me.
All right, I'm going to grill you. I'm going to throw some curveballs at you.
Okay.
People are going to want to hear all the answers here.
Yes.
All right, let's start at the top, and we're going to work
Okay.
our way through the elements that make up Heart of Racing's Le Mans adventure, their very first time at Le Mans.
Okay. Okay.
Let's start with the how. How did Heart of Racing manage to get to Le Mans?
That is a great question. And we had intentions. We had the intentions to go to Le Mans. First off, we had intentions to be a part of the WEC, but they limit the grid, and there's historical teams in there that make out the grid. And we ended up I remember, going through. Ian was going through all the paperwork, not me really, but to try and get the team included in work, and there was a lot of paperwork, a lot of things had to be done and figured out. And ultimately, we weren't chosen. We were first alternate team to do the WEC, and obviously with WEC, Le Mans is the shining carrot in the sky that you're doing it all for, right? Everyone
Yeah.
wants to be a part of Le Mans. It being the 100th year, it was definitely something that the Heart of Racing wanted to be involved in. But as I said, we ended up being first alternate. Not many people drop out, so we licked our wounds. But then we tried to make an entry into just Le Mans itself, which some other teams can add in, and we weren't on that list either. So that was very disappointing. We thought we might we would be, but it just didn't happen. So NASCAR took our. No, they didn't really. But as I said, there's a lot of seniority, should we say, from people in other series that we just didn't have enough pull basically to
Those
get on the
darn
grid.
flying lizards.
Yes, yes. So we licked our wounds again and went, oh well, that's it. No 100th Le Mans for us. So got on with the rest of our program. I mean, we were making plans and thinking, how is this going to work and all this stuff. But in the end, it was like, okay, well, I guess it's not going to happen. We can just kind of get to all the other programs. We had an SRO program, IMSA program, and a couple of other extra races as we go along here. So, yeah.
So then you got the call someone did bail
Yeah,
out.
so there was an Aston team, Northwest, that had entered the WEC series who had been there for a long time. They've been uh, in that series for a long time, helped by ProDrive. So this was a team that was basically supported by ProDrive, who are the supports for Aston Martin Racing in sports cars. And for whatever reason, they decided to pull out of the series. And we are probably the biggest Aston Martin racing program in the world at this point, I believe. Um, and so the next call from when the Northwest team wanted to pull out was to us to see if we were still interested in jumping on board. And henceforth, we did, but there was not a lot of time. There was like maybe 8 weeks before Le
Well,
Mans
that's
that we even found out that this was even a possibility. Then we had to figure out how we could do it and where we would do it, and then sign on the dotted line. Okay, we're going, and then it was all hands on deck
well,
basically.
that's what I was going to ask you. With such short notice, how did all the details work out? What car did you have,
Yeah,
and how did all that gel?
yeah. Well, as you know, like with Le Mans, it's a GTLM car, not a GT3 car. So there isn't enough time to convert one of our cars to a GTLM car anyway. But the Northwest team were actually using one of the Aston Martin factory cars in the championship. So basically, we just kind of adopted that car for Le Mans. And actually, we did obviously did a race before Le Mans, which was Spa,
Hmm.
which is the lead up to it, which was really like a test for us to get going, which I wasn't even able to make. So yeah, so it's basically a factory Aston Martin supported program, and we're just kind of inserting ourselves in there slowly and steadily into the program. But they run a great program. I mean, ProDrive, have been very successful. Dave Ritz was actually at Le Mans, walked right by me. I
Yeah,
wanted to get his, picture with him, but that's kind of you don't really do that in the garage at Le Mans, right? Got to be all important and oh yes, Mr. Ritz
yeah,
is
it's
very good.
Dave. How you doing, Dave?
So yeah. So they had all the pieces in place really to run the car already, and it certainly wouldn't have been advantageous for us to come in there and thinking we can rip it all up and start again and put up a successful effort. So it's a combination. It's supported by ProDrive, and we're gradually gonna bring our personnel into it to a certain level. But obviously, we're still running in so many other series. That's not easy to do.
Mm.
There's conflicts with travel, with actual
Hmm.
weekends of racing. So for this year, we're really going to lean on the ProDrive group quite a lot. And then at the end of the year, then we're going to have to reevaluate and see where all our current pieces are, personnel, etc., are going to
Hmm.
fit in for the next year.
Wow.
Mm.
That's interesting. So it's not a
Yeah.
case of you and Ian just puttering around in an Aston Martin over here and just lucking out. I mean, ProDives knows who you guys are. Aston
Oh,
Martin
absolutely.
knows who you guys are. You guys
Yeah.
are one of the bigger Aston Martin running operations, period.
Yeah.
And so when an Aston Martin bowed out, they thought, well, then it's got to be harder racing. So,
Yeah.
so
And a lot of people in our IMSA effort, we usually bring a two or three ProDrive people over. We get supported by um, engineers at ProDrive, Aston Martin Racing all the time.
yeah,
So a lot of the same people, even that are on our team in IMSA, were actually on the car at Le Mans.
gotcha. Okay.
right? Because they're part of our team. We're
Yeah.
it's it really is a yeah, it's a team effort from both sides, from the hard
Yeah.
racing and both. We're all gunning for the same thing, and we do work together hand in hand with ProDrive on every side of GT4, GT3, and now obviously the WC program.
So fair to say that Dave Richards probably has Lawrence Stroll's contact on his phone.
Yes, I'm sure. Actually, Ian James does too.
Oh,
But
Ian does. Okay, good. You can see Ian calling up Lawrence.
yeah,
Just don't set close to him. He may adjust the junk, and you don't want to do that, Ian. I'm just looking out for. All
yeah,
right, let's talk about the difference.
mm,
ACO, who's the governing body, versus
yeah,
IMSA.
yeah.
So, what are the differences between working with IMSA and working with the ACO? The sporting regulations, technical regulations, overall scope. Are the ACO sporting records more voluminous voluminous than the IMSA's, or the other way around? What's it like?
Yeah, I would. It's a different vibe. I'm not sure how to. I don't think rules wise, there's a lot of differentiators.
Mm-hmm.
I think they both coexist together and transfer information on how their approach is, obviously. Because I think IMSA is supported by ACO and kind of back what their theory is, and they've worked together with this new hypercar program. So there's no
Mm-hmm.
way their rules aren't very tightly knit together.
Yeah.
Um, on being at Le Mans my first time, I didn't really get to know anybody. On the ACO side, on the IMSA, I nearly know everybody, and
Yeah.
it's kind of a family knit. What I love about IMSA is you can sit down there and chat with Bo or John Doonan about anything. It doesn't
Right.
mean they're always going to agree with you, um, but you can sit there and talk and move on, bring up a subject matter, hash it out, and move on. With ACO, they seemed a bit more distant, but that may be
Mm-hmm.
just because it was my first time there, right? That there's ACO is over there and we're over here, and
Yeah.
there's the only integration is the marshals in the pit lane. Didn't see a
Right.
lot of people coming by, shaking our hand and welcoming us in, etc. So, but it's a machine.
Yeah. Yeah.
They've been doing it a long time,
Long time.
and
Yeah.
and I think it's more Formula One than IMSA for sure. I mean, just
Yeah.
how the teams have to present themselves, the support back there in the paddock, how the governing body, you know, dole out their penalties. There's not a lot of gray areas, I would say.
Did you get the impression, Paul, when you showed up? And I know it's Le Mans, all the pomp and circumstance, massive because this is their crown jewel,
Yeah.
a bit like Daytona 24 for you guys. But
Mhm.
but when you showed up, did you instantly kind of get the impression is like, wow, there's a lot more money in this series than there is in IMSA?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
And IMSA racing is serious, but it definitely was a couple of levels of seriousness above that. As I said, I
yeah,
liken it more to Formula One than anything I've seen, quite
yeah,
honestly.
yeah.
American racing is a bit more laid back,
Mm-hmm.
and that's why a lot of people from Europe actually like coming here,
Yeah,
because
right.
it's a different feeling. But there, it's like you're a team, your blinkers are on, and you're just worrying about there. There's not a lot of mixing
Yeah,
and matching, but yeah, the support there. I mean, I think I sent you some photos of just
yeah,
just just the layout of all the teams and how much money is spent, and
yeah.
all these, um, yeah, the support buildings and catering tents and everything. It's very, very, as I said, very close to Formula One than anything I've ever been a part of.
So, what about this is the mother of all arguing points, the balance of performance, the BOP.
Ah,
How does each series approach BOP? Are they different? Are they very much similar? Does one seem more realistic or fair than the other? And did
yeah.
you agree with the BOP judgment on your car?
Yeah, the BOP is definitely done differently. It's a lot more systematic, computerized BOP in the ACO, but also they know what they're dealing with, and they've been dealing with these cars and teams for a long time. And as much as like on the car, um, there's not a lot that changes. So I think they've really got their head around all the
Mm-hmm.
cars. There's a lot less manufacturers at Le Mans than there are in IMSA. I mean, IMSA have a
Right.
headache with all the people, all the different manufacturers, and you're
Yeah.
trying to level that playing field. Basically, in
Yeah.
GT, it was Porsche, Aston Martin,
Ferrari.
Ferrari, and a Corvette. Right?
Yeah.
Is that it? I
Was there a
believe.
BMW in that?
No BMW,
No.
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 So it was a lot simpler,
Yeah.
and I think
Yeah.
they've,
Yeah.
and because of that, I think they've kept other manufacturers out to make sure they keep, their head around it all. So I think it was done very well. I think the cars were very close, but I think that's also because they've got a kind of a simpler job without have to deal with so many
Yeah.
different manufacturers, teams, and levels of support. Quite honestly,
Yeah.
in IMSA, you've got, if you've got a Lamborghini team from a guy in Houston, or you've got the factory BMW team, it's
Yeah.
difficult to manipulate that. But in at Le Mans, the level seemed very level from one manufacturer to the next and team to the next.
Right. So, in terms of race management, Paul, what are the differences in how ACO or ACO/FIA manage that race or those races versus how IMSA's race control operates?
Yeah, once again, more regimented, right? I
Mm-hmm.
mean, in IMSA, you got Bo just having a chit chat with people before the race, and talking back and forth. You're messaging him during the race. Hey, how about this? This wasn't right. That kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they're a bit more on a cloud, a little more remote. But just like the BOP, which is a lot more computerized, a lot more regimented, I would say, the processes in place
Yeah.
are also very, very regimented, very defined. There's
Mm-hmm.
not a lot of gray area that any team can play in. So, and if you don't want to play their game, then the hammer comes down.
Did you feel? I know there was certainly a lot of talk on social media. Well, first of all, the GT race was almost non-existent on American coverage. But
Yeah, that's a
did
shame.
you? Yeah, it was unfortunate. I think they'll probably get it right. They were, just getting their sea legs with that coverage on Motor Trend.
Yeah,
But anyway, um, and I know Jason over there Jason's awesome dude. He gets the plot more than most. But did you feel that the slow zones were good or bad for the race? And there's a lot of discussion about that.
yeah, and I think the slow zones work well.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, the length of time it ended up being safety car, was very frustrating. So anything we do not to have a safety car, I think, is an advantage. I
Yeah.
personally like the slow zones because it keeps the race moving,
Mm-hmm.
and it keeps the pace of your car more relevant to success.
Yeah.
Right? In IMSA, you're waiting on the next yellow, and everyone's going to catch back up again. Unfortunately, that didn't happen at the Glen this week. But with the slow zones, as it keeps a race ongoing, even if for that it's neutralized for a small section of the track.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as you get going, the race is on again. I think it's difficult, really hard for the drivers, because I've always talked about rhythm when you're
Mm-hmm.
driving around a track, and if you're driving into a slow zone every at different places on the track at different times, makes really hard for the drivers. Plus, we always talk about critical tire temperatures,
Mm-hmm.
pressures, etc. Um, that really takes a beating in these slow zones.
Yeah.
And so, if it's too long a slow zone, your tires are going to really cool down. Really tricky for drivers to get back up to speed, knowing that in just a few minutes you're going to be back in that slow zone again. So
Yeah.
really, really tough on the drivers. Not it's not too tough, but it's just definitely a discipline they have to learn. And as you know, Le Mans had banned tire heaters, but now they brought them back in.
Mm-hmm.
The drivers started yelling, so you know how critical that tire temperature
Yeah.
is, for the cars to be successful, coming out onto the track. And the slow zones is always a constant fight back against that.
Right. Right.
Yeah,
So did you feel like that race control managed the penalties and sort of enforcement side of the race pretty well?
yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, the worst thing you can do is have inconsistency and murky officiating.
Yeah.
Something I've dealt with this year a few
In
times.
spades.
Yes. Not really in IMSA, but other places. But
Yeah.
and that's what, as a team, that's what you're looking. You want consistency, and
It's what
you
we
don't
want in
want
F1.
any.
Yeah.
Huh?
It's what
Yeah,
we
yeah,
yeah, in F1,
absolutely.
same thing, yeah.
Consistency. So it's seen, they had the track limits thing. There was track limits at Le Mans,
Yeah.
and the hammer came down when the hammer should have come down on certain teams, and so you knew that the teams that were more flamboyant with that stuff were actually gonna get penalized when they should have been penalized. And if you were gonna be the team that was gonna make sure your drivers stayed out of those problems, um, then you'll be clear. So
Yeah.
it was kind of nice in that way. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
Maybe a bit more sterile, I get it,
Yeah. Yeah.
but definitely clear and concise. Yeah.
So let's talk about the facility itself. What were the facilities like at Lassard?
Mm.
All of these, after all these years, did it run like a well-oiled machine? Was it difficult to get to and from the track for your team and drivers? And how far
Yeah.
away did you have to stay? That kind of thing.
Well, I would say it was ran very well. Like it, this wasn't their first rodeo.
Yeah.
And from what I found out from my grandmother, who I call her my grandmother, but it's the lady that had the house where I stayed at. So who I got to try my French out on, was telling me that
Oui.
all the people that work, most of the people that work at Le Mans are volunteers from the area,
Hmm.
and they work there for free, and they do it for the love of being part of the event and then being able to get into the event, of course, which was
Yeah.
sold out. But everyone being volunteers, there wasn't no slouches. People took their job seriously.
Yeah.
So I think whoever was managing it and making sure these people that were managing the spectators and the teams, etc., did a heck of a job. But that being said, um, they do need a traffic flow engineer
Yeah.
because getting out of that place, and maybe there's no fight against it. You're dealing with a French town, and you're dealing with 350,000 people. How do you get out of that track quickly?
Yeah.
Uh, I myself was staying 10 miles away, but could take me an hour and a half to get there, right?
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and it was only the first 2 miles, actually just getting out of the track, trying to get to the town of Arnage, and then trying to get the hell out of there, right? Some days were better than others, but it was a bit brutal when the last session ended at midnight, and you weren't actually able to get home till 2 in the morning,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
then the next session was first thing in the morning, so it was
So
tough.
how and why were you in a helicopter?
Well, it was part of actually Gabe Newell and Jan, the supporters of the team. They invited a lot of associates to the event, and so they wanted to treat them with VIP status. So part of that was flying off in a helicopter to a fancy dinner at a chateau one night,
Huh?
which is what you got to do when you go to Le Mans, right? So
Yeah. Right.
so that's how I ended up in a helicopter. So I had to go
Funny.
to that dinner and talk about everything we were doing. It was fun. We had a few people of the team actually although they couldn't be a part of the team we were running. We opened it up to team members, so some of them were able to actually make it, and so they kind of rolled into the VIP hospitality too. So that was great for them. Every single team member on the IMSA side and SRO side would have wanted to be there, changing tires and doing stuff.
Yeah.
We
Sure.
just wasn't capable. So um, at least they got to get to that event. I think they appreciated that. Along with,
Yeah.
we actually had Hannah and Rihanna from the SRO team, drive team, our girl car, so to speak. They came and were kind of hosting in the hospitality suite all the guests and everything. So yeah, with an event like that, you got to it comes with other things, right? All the teams have sponsors that they have to adhere to and entertain, and we weren't any different from that.
Yeah. I kept going through the mail from Gabe. I didn't get my invite. I kept looking at
Yeah,
my
no
letters.
helicopter game. I
Didn't
don't
get
know.
what
Yeah,
was going
you
on.
have to
Now I
sign up.
have.
Have to sign up for your internet stuff with Valve, I guess.
Yeah. Right.
Hmm.
I did, and I have been to the 24 with you.
Yeah.
And what I'm dying to know is how was the food at the track? Was it anything like Daytona's stale chips and dodgy roller dogs?
It was absolutely nothing like that. It was it was top notch all the way. It
Yeah.
really was.
Yeah.
Oh, I before I get to that, you were asking me about where we all stayed. So I
Yeah. Yeah.
stayed, it was a last minute thing. Where do we all stay? So we were
Right.
all over the place. I was the only one that stayed at this house about 10 miles away. Um, the drivers all stayed in RVs in the track,
Ah, okay.
and a lot of our team from our team that were helping with ProDrive in the pits stayed in these little mobile homes, basically inside the
Gotcha.
track. I was the only one who was outside actually,
Oh,
um, and then our other VIP guests stayed at various fancy places outside the track too. So
gotcha.
yeah, so
Interesting.
that I was the only one that had to be up at 2 in the morning trying to find my way out. Do I make a right or left at Arnage? I don't know. But
That's
anyway,
great.
I tried the inside mobile home thing the first night, and I was like,
Yeah.
it just wasn't cutting it
That's
for me.
not happening.
Unfortunately, there was one too many people in a mobile home. I'll say,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Okay. I'd be with you there.
yeah,
Okay, so let's talk about the race.
yes.
How many strategy meetings did you, Ian, and the team have to figure out how you were going to attack this race?
How many? I mean, it's a constant flow. Quite honestly,
Hmm.
you're always pre-briefing the session, looking to see what you're trying to do. You're post-briefing the session, then seeing what you found out in that session, and how that's going to affect what possibly you want to do in the race.
Hmm.
Um, it was pretty succinct. There wasn't a lot of changes on the car because this car's been to Le Mans a few times. It had won Le Mans the previous year, so they've got a good handle on the car. So there's not a lot of throwing different
Hmm.
dampers and roll bars and settings, everything at it. So the engineering part of the car was pretty spot on. So it was a lot more about getting the drivers up to speed to learn the car, learn the track, learn
Hmm.
the different, how does it when you double stint tires, how does it feel going into the Mulsanne chicane the first time on old tires and a full tank of fuel? So it's
Hmm.
really about how the drivers what they were gonna get them as much knowledge around the track as possible because none of them really had been there before. I
Right.
mean, I know Ian had been there 20 years ago, but it was a whole new ball of wax there. So
Right.
the drivers need to learn the nuances of slow zones, how the team works, how the car's going to feel in this setting, that setting. How
Yeah.
do you save fuel? How do you manipulate the tires? What can you handle? Can you do a triple stint? And once we got all that information, or as best we could, then it was just kind of ticking the boxes and doing what really made sense with for the race strategy.
And I got to think, Paul, with that short notice, I mean, you probably didn't have a lot of time to even really contemplate who your competition was or how you'd approach them or how you'd map out a race against who you thought would be the stiffest competition.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We didn't really pay much attention to. I mean, you pay attention to what other people do on the timeship, but you're not creating a strategy to fight someone in
Right.
particular for sure. No,
Right.
you're just trying to get your car to be in the
Hmm.
best, do the most laps in the race, and then see where the cards fall at that versus the competition. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right, so let's break this race down into three sections, three thirds, if you will.
Whew.
So the first third of the race, how was the start? Those initial 8 hours, was the car well balanced? Were you able to really dial the car in ahead of the race? Were the tires working well? What was the traffic like? What was that first 8 hours looking like?
Yeah. Well, Alex qualified, so he started. So we unfortunately didn't get a great qualifying lap, although our pace was good. Because in qualifying there was a lot of slow zones and red
Yeah.
flags and things like that. So we never actually got a good lap. So we started pretty far back. So Alex was able to move up quite a bit during this. The car was quite raceable. We weren't trying to do anything magical or chase to the front as soon as we could. We're just trying to methodically moving our way up, and it was good. Um, so it was pretty solid. No dramas there. And then I believe it was it was when Ian was driving. He got hit by, I think it was a Peugeot
Hmm.
um, going into Indianapolis. I'm trying to remember where it was, but basically came out and swung, hit him, um, and so it did a little bit of damage. And the problem is, it did a little bit of damage, and we were like, they came in at the pit stop, the car ran um, to try and fix the damage. Unfortunately, when they tried to fix the damage, something got dislodged on the hood, and so the car went out and the hood came up
Ugh.
on Alex. So we lost a lot of time. He made it back, looking outside window, made it back, but then we had to push the car back into the garage, do repairs. So we lost time there in two places, so we ended up 2 laps down. Now, as I said, in IMSA, you go 2 laps down in a 24-hour race, you could possibly get those laps back fairly quick. We actually saw the BMW that ended up being second overall at Watkins Glen do that in a 6-hour race because of the yellow flag rules.
Yeah.
That's not easy to do at Le Mans
Yeah.
with the rules.
Right.
So with the lack of yellows and slow zones, as I said, the good thing is slow zones enable your pace to really rule where you finish, as opposed to working the system. But so it put us 2 laps down. We were in the same 2 laps down as the Corvette, actually,
Mm.
because they had problems at the beginning too. So we were trying to figure out how do we possibly get it back. And the only chance you got is to push,
Right.
not make mistakes and push. We weren't sure. We didn't think there would be that many yellow pace car runs at Le Mans, but it ended up in the early first half of the race. There was quite a lot because there was a lot of
Yeah.
carnage, actually. A lot of
Right.
people getting a little feisty out there. So that did enable us to, by pushing, you push, try to get as far up as you can. We did enable to get a lap back when one of those yellow safety car came out. But we weren't able to make use of the second one because we didn't have enough fuel to wait for
Mm.
the pass around.
Yeah.
So we had to pit. And so to get that last lap back proved to be really impossible for us in the end.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So that,
That'd
that
be
was that
tough.
was the drama of the first third of the race, and we were always fighting our way from that
Hmm.
going forward.
So the second third, this is the nighttime. This is
Mm,
where Ian drove. And in the past, I've interviewed Alan McNish, and I remember him telling me that the nighttime, is always kind of a magic time to drive. You can make up a lot
hmm.
of time there. Depends on what your competition's doing. If they're putting the gentleman drivers in, you
Yeah.
can really, really smoke it, and make up a lot of time. Just depends.
Yeah.
But the tires cool down, the track cools down. This is a magic time at the night. Was this the case for you guys? Did you feel like maybe the night could be an opportunity? Were you able to make up time?
Well, I think our driver strategy was an opportunity for sure.
Hmm.
Because usually the bronze drivers, which is kind of counterintuitive, is they usually put the bronze drivers in fairly early in the race, and then they actually let them do the next day. They don't put them in the night at all,
Mm.
and like in the last 10 hours, they do their 2 other stints. They let the pro drivers lay the foundation, as I said, of pace and get a big gap there so there's no pressure on the other driver to do it. You could go further back if you put them in too early, but because Ian was so quick, um, and the rules are this year you had to have a bronze, silver, and a gold or platinum driver. So Ian's a bronze because he turned 50, um, but he's a fast one. We were
Hmm.
able just to literally alternate them, and leave Daniel and Alex to really, in that last 10 hours to really put it down. So yeah, we made gains in the night for sure, but the biggest thing was the rain. The rain
Yeah.
was hellacious, and Daniel was in that car for most of that rain, and he did a heck of a job. There was a lot
Yeah,
of
he
cars
did.
that didn't make it out of that rain, and he was screaming on the radio. He didn't want to be there, but he stuck into it, man. He
Yeah.
he was holding on for dear life. He said the aquaplaning was horrendous, the visuals were horrendous. As I said, a lot of drivers made a lot of mistakes out there, but just
Yeah.
surviving through the rain, not necessarily as much the night, but those conditions moved us up quite a lot. Because in
Yeah.
the end we ended up P6 rather than where we started P20 or something like that. So we moved
Yeah.
up a lot, but that was the most significant jump in where we were for sure.
Was that second, third?
Was
Yeah.
was Daniel's rain? Yeah, and we kept him in because once you're driving in the rain, um, you don't really want to bring in a new driver who has to find out
Yeah.
what it's all about. So we actually had to triple stint him in the rain. Um, and after that, he was just mentally exhausted.
Yeah, I bet.
We had to literally give him a lot more rest than we had initially planned. Luckily,
Yeah.
as I said, Ian was up for the job, so he was able to buy him more rest time because mentally he was completely drained after that triple in the rain.
And from a team perspective, Paul, what's it like to, obviously you just talk about what the drivers are going through in a situation like that. What's it like for the team to service that car in the middle of the night when everyone would normally be asleep, right?
Yeah.
So you've got the whole team. What's it like to service that car and try to, manage that?
Yeah, it's a weird like flow to it, right? Because you do the pit stop, everyone panic,
Yeah.
and then everyone literally, the pro drive guys said a lot of them are on our IMSA team too. Um, they know how to manage their energy, right? They
Hmm.
know that the pit stop's done. You still stay on guard for a couple laps, make sure everything's going fine. There was no dramas, no mistakes. Then they're able to kind of kick back, lay back, take about 30 minutes. But then as the warnings come on, okay, 15 till pit stop, 10 till pit stop, everyone starts getting very agitated, very
Yeah.
busy. As I said, we got the tire warmers on there, so the tire warmers are on full boat. And yeah, the pit stops are crazy because the tire warmers are in the back, and they put them on basically a moving platform, but they have to do it the last possible second. And there's
Hmm.
people in there, there's
Yeah.
lookers in, there's people. The guy pushing this is just screaming out, "Tires coming through!" So this thing coming from the back, like 100 miles an hour, coming in. They take him off, and then boom, the car comes in, stops. The hot tires go on the car, the fuel goes in, and the car goes on its way. And so yeah, it's a basically a minute of just pure craziness,
Yeah.
and then it
Mayhem. Yeah.
all then I said that then you wait a couple laps and then it all dies down. But they really, yeah, really try to manage that energy level. But you can't be sleeping on a job when something big happens, and they
And I
were
guess with the
definitely up for it.
rain, it was probably a little difficult because it was raining. But did the car evolve itself quite a bit from day to night and into the night? The rain was a big delta, but as you got
Yeah,
into the early morning where it wasn't raining and a drying track, did that car's balance and everything really change quite a bit?
well, yeah, it did. Because obviously with the rain comes a clean track,
Hmm.
but the crack even after the rain came fairly early. I can't even remember what time it was now, but the track evolved a lot and gained a
Hmm.
lot of grip in those last few hours.
Hmm.
Um, and but you have the setup for that to adjust it, but you
Yeah.
really set the car up for the last half. But you don't give too much away at the beginning, but you really make sure you're in the middle of the adjustments. So whichever the track gives you at every pit stop, you can make tire pressure adjustments, maybe some bar adjustments, maybe some settings adjustments to try and get yourself back in the window, so to speak.
Yeah.
But definitely the track gripped up quite a lot by the end.
Interesting. So as the sun comes up, track starts to get warmer.
Hmm.
At this point, the sun starts coming out, getting on that track, starts heating up.
Yeah.
What was the state of the car at that point? When not just at the crack of dawn, but as the sun come up, and it starts to get kind of warm in the early morning,
Yeah.
was the car pretty beat up? Were the brakes? Was the long pedal? How was the car?
Yeah, no, I mean these are all the things we managed in the practices to try and figure out what we could and could do. I mean, the goal was to um, go the full time without a brake change.
Hmm.
There's an advantage to that because there's a time penalty for changing the brakes, obviously. And as I said, you go up the road 60 seconds, they've got to drive the hell out of the thing to catch you up. So that was, and that's how and there's certain things in the setup and adjustments of brake balance and stuff, you can protect the brake pads, but we ultimately knew we should have a pretty good brake pedal by the end, and from all the feedback we got, the car was ready to rock and roll at the end, no matter what. The brakes were working great, so everything we did with the pads and the setup, and managing the drivers during the race to make sure we didn't take too much out of it really paid off at the end too.
So now it's daylight, you can see, and as we're closing in towards the end of it, so you started out the race with one plan. You had the hood issue. You're a couple laps down. You get a lap back, so you've changed your race strategy at least once at that point because you're
Yeah.
2 laps, and then once you get a lap back, you're probably tweaking it from that, trying to get the other lap back.
Hmm.
So as you come into the morning, how many times did you have to change your race strategy throughout that 24 hours?
Yeah, I mean, after the rain, it really plateaued out, actually. I'd say the last half of the race was pretty much not pedestrian, but there were no real big moments, so
Yeah,
to speak, where we had to go, holy shit, what do we do now?
right.
Um, it is a very short night at Le Mans, by the way, compared
Yes,
to
it is.
Daytona.
Which is forever.
It's
Yeah,
forever, but Le Mans,
yeah,
it's like it's daylight at 5, and it seems to go. It's so minimal that the actual night running there.
yeah,
It's not a lot of time to really get into the night. Really,
yeah, yeah,
you feel like it's been day the whole time. So, yeah, no, I think everything was there was no dramas the last 12 hours. We were hoping for a little drama, just to try
yeah.
and maybe get our lap back somehow, but there was a few dramas with other teams and this and that. And as I said, we just gradually edged away. And when you measure expectations, right, it's like you go to Le Mans, what's your dream? Your dream is to win Le Mans,
Yeah,
right?
of course.
Can we win Le Mans on our first time? That's your first goal,
Yeah,
right? And
right.
maybe it's not, very realistic. Maybe, I don't know, why not? You got to go for something.
Yeah,
So when you get those problems in a long race like this, you manage your expectations about what's successful.
right.
And, our success at some point, when we had all the hood issues and the rain and everything, it was like, we just want to finish this thing,
Yeah, yeah, right,
But then when it started, it was light out, it was dry,
right.
we were fairly quick, and we started to catch people and pass people and move up the order. Then you're like, okay, who's next? Who's next?
Who's
Who's
next? Yeah,
next? Who's
yeah, yeah,
next? And it looked like we were going to be, probably at midnight, we were like, if we can get P8 or 9, we would be ecstatic with how the first half of the race has gone.
yeah,
But that expectation got raised as we showed how competitive we were and how other people maybe made mistakes or had issues. So, and we
yeah.
eventually ended up moving up to P6 by the final. So, and we
That's
were happy with
awesome.
that. Honestly,
Yeah,
everyone was happy with that. The team we were. It was our first Le Mans.
yeah,
Um, there were no tears of or frustrations at the end of that race. We were part of such a big event, being part of it. I'm not one for participation rosettes. I'm a pretty competitive person. But to be a part of that very special weekend was brilliant, and to be able to compete and be
yeah,
competitive,
yeah, right,
and if not get onto the podium was very satisfying. So everyone walked away very happy, I think.
right. So you finished P6, which is awesome. Your very first Le
Yeah.
Mans. What was the biggest lessons that you learned? What would you focus on next year that may have caught you out this year? Anything?
Yeah. No, I don't. It's going to be so different next year.
Yeah,
It's going to be so different. Different car. It was really like the end of an era for the GT cars there, and
yeah,
everything was kind of under control. All the manufacturers, ACO, everyone knew what to expect. These cars have been coming there for the past 3 or 4 years. I think it's going to turn on its head when GT3 comes with multiple more manufacturers on it. So
yeah,
I think for us, it's actually a strong point because we've been dealing with that with IMSA for so
hmm,
long and with the GT3 cars. So I think what we will do next year is bring everything we've learned and be a bit more confident
hmm.
in pushing our agenda onto it, right? We
Right,
were
right.
we were really leaning a lot on ProDrive and their expertise and their success to help this rendition. But yeah, there's a lot of planning to do. There's a
Yeah.
lot of planning to do for this race. Um, and so you really need the groundwork to start very, very early for sure.
So
Um,
if you win your class next year, could you get it into your contract? Will Ian let you borrow his Rolex from time to time?
I'm not even going to ask him. I'm just going to take it.
Just take
He's
it.
he's already had one. I'm going
He's
to
already
take
got a
it.
Rolex.
Hey,
Yeah.
even if I have to give it back, I'm definitely going to get some watch time. I
Yeah, there
promise you
you
that.
go. There
Yeah.
you go. That's good. Well, interesting. Well, to close out, there was a mailbag question that I wanted to read because it was about Le Mans. It was from
Okay.
Wayne Larson. He said, I just watched NASCAR built a car for Le Mans this year, and that got me to thinking with F1 always looking for the next big spectacle, what would it take for F1 to hold a race at the Circuit de la Sarthe?
Mm.
Obviously not a 24 hours, but a typical race length. What do you think it would take having been there?
I don't think they would need to do anything. It's just a matter of, do the ACO want Formula One there?
Mm-hmm.
We've seen what happens to Indy.
Mm-hmm.
When it was only the Indy 500, now everyone and their mother have racing events there.
Yeah.
I think it took a little bit of the specialness out of it, and
Mm-hmm.
I think the ACO would feel like Formula One would come in and want to up Le Mans, and I think
Yeah.
that's the last thing they want to see.
Right.
So I think facility wise, I don't think much would have to do. I think the track is an
Grade
F1
one.
grade track, right?
Yeah, I
With
don't know if it's
safety
grade
points.
one. I would think
Yeah.
it might be, or if it is, it wouldn't take a whole lot to get it there.
No, I wouldn't.
I wouldn't think.
Yeah, obviously the big speeds are
That's the
something else,
worry.
right? So the
Yeah.
length of the track and the speeds that the Formula One cars would get to might really dictate a lot more changes safety wise than even we'd
Then,
expect.
yeah, that may
Yeah, because
be.
it's still got a lot of the old Le Mans in it, you
It
know,
does.
and kind of like Spa's kind of taken some of that away, but the old Spa
Yeah.
used to have a lot of, you could see,
Yeah.
Jim
Right.
Clark going round that corner. You can
Yes.
see here, you can still see, the 962s or
Yeah.
917s going around Arnage and stuff like that. It's still, that visual is still the same. So they probably have to be more than we think, but I just don't see the OCO ever taking their cherry, and
Yeah.
meeting it out to Formula One. Formula One's got plenty of other places to go.
Yeah, and the two series do have a lot of deference for each other. They try not to step on each other. I think Formula
Hmm.
One kind of tries to avoid Le Mans weekend, vice versa with Monaco or whatever. I think they do have
Right.
some deference. Well, that is awesome, an awesome debrief on Le Mans. I'm excited. I was absolutely elated that you got to go, and
Yeah, it
jealous
was a big deal.
because that's one race I'd love to go to. But awesome review, and thanks for taking time to share that with us.
Thank
And
you. Sure, I
standing
could get
in.
Ian here, but he's so busy right now.
Yeah, no, I
We
get
will,
it. I get it.
maybe we can do a wrap up of the season with Ian or something
That
like
would
that.
be
But
cool. Yeah,
as I
yeah,
said, he's on a plane right now to Spa to race there, so he's
yeah.
hard,
Well,
hard to catch.
I think yeah, he's a bit like Ryan Reynolds these days.
A bit
Trying to
like
get
that. It's
trying to get
just like Ryan Reynolds.
some
Yeah.
FaceTime with Ian is pretty tough. Back
Yeah.
in the day, I used to go to like Petite, and
Right.
Ian couldn't have been more delightful to take time to chat with me and stuff.
Yeah,
But now he's
yeah.
a
I mean,
busy
he still
guy.
would. He still would. It's not like he's
Yeah.
he's feeling self-important. It's just that
No,
literally
he's a busy guy.
he's burning it on both ends right
He
now.
is.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But I think TPF listeners would love to hear from Ian. Maybe at the end of the
Yeah.
season, that'd be a lot of fun. A lot of people. He's kind of an enigma, that Ian James. He just, he's pretty measured guy, and not a
Yeah.
lot of people hear him. He's not out in front of the
No.
cameras much, and yeah, people would love to hear from him. So anyway,
Yeah.
well, Paul, thanks for setting in for Grace this week. Really appreciate it. A huge thank you to our Patreon supporters. As always, we could not and would not do this podcast if it weren't for you. So the only thing keeping this podcast going is our Patreon supporters. And if you'd like to be one, you can go over to our website. At the top right of our website it says support us. You click on that link, it'll take you to our Patreon page. You can support us as little as $1 a month. That's $12, like a couple
That's
coffees.
nothing.
It's nothing.
That's two cups of coffee for crying out loud.
That's right. So if you scroll down in the website, in the middle of the website, got some new swag, got new logo shirt and a new logo mug. So maybe
Ooh.
you're not a t-shirt wearing person, but you're a coffee drinker because you're an American and you have to watch Formula One in the wee hours of the morning. You can get your own Parc Fermé mug over there. You can do
Lovely.
that. And if you like the podcast, go over to iTunes or your favorite player and give us a good rating. We'd appreciate the love as well. So until next week, Paul, you and I got to come back. The hills are alive with the sound of Verstappen.
Oh, they
Right?
are for
In
sure.
Austria, going to be
The
talking
ring.
about Austria. Yes, the ring.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
I like this track. It's
Two
fun.
men
It's
enter,
fun.
one man leaves. This is a fun track, and you and I've
Yeah.
talked about this. There is a rhythm there, man, and that track's so
Absolutely.
few turns. It is not an easy track. On a piece of paper, it looks like it might be, but it's not.
Yeah.
So it should be interesting. So we'll come back next weekend. We'll review that, and until that time, when we come back and do it all over again, this is Todd, aka Negative Camera, saying so long.
That's it, man. Game over, man. It's game